Our big focus this Friday morning, a Malaysia Airlines passenger jet crashed in Ukraine last evening near the country's border with Russia, killing all 295 people on board.
Well, flight MH17 was en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it disappears from radar screens. The Ukrainian government and pro-Russian separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine immediately blamed each other for the crash.
Mistakenly, the Ukrainian military forces shot down a Russian commercial airliner over the Black Sea.
Malaysian Airlines plane MH17 reportedly shot down over eastern Ukraine. All 280 passengers and 15 crew members dead. Among them, mostly Dutch, Americans, Australians and Britons. At least 80 children on the ill-fated flight. Scenes of devastation with burning debris and body parts spread over a wide area near the village of Grabovo at the Russia-Ukraine border. Thick black smoke billowing in an open field. The plane's flight path, sourced up to the final moments before its transponder stopped broadcasting location data, shows MH17 cutting clear through the country, then exploding mid-air, just 50 kilometers short of Ukraine. The world watched with shock.
This is a tragic day in what has already been a tragic year for Malaysia. As we work to understand what happened, our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of those on board the flight. The flight's passengers and crew came from many different countries, but today, regardless of nationality, we are all united in grief. Thank you.
Obviously, the world is watching reports of a downed passenger jet near the Russia-Ukraine border. And it looks like it may be a terrible tragedy. Right now, we're working to determine whether there were American citizens on board. That is our first priority. And I've directed my national security team to stay in close contact with the Ukrainian government. The United States will offer any assistance we can to help determine what happened and why.
Flying at 10,000 feet before exploding in mid-air, the plane was flying over the heavily militarized zone on the Russian-Ukraine border. Going by the US intelligence reports, the Malaysian Airlines plane was shot at using the Buk surface-to-air missile. Ukrainian authorities claim of Moscow's direct involvement in supporting separatist insurgents in eastern Ukraine. Moscow denies all accusations.
Розмова з прем'єр-міністром Голландії, де висловив співчуття і від імені України запросив голландських фахівців і експертів до прозорого відкритого розслідування цього терористичного акту. Хочу звернути вашу увагу, що ми це називаємо не інцидент, не катастрофа, а терористичний акт.
Pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine have reportedly found the black box flight recorder from the wreckage. Footage taken showed the charred remains of passports and suitcases scattered on the crash site. Emergency workers tackling the blazes that broke out right after the crash. Scenes reminiscent of MH17 disaster, as grieving relatives gather at airports to learn the fate of their loved ones. Loved ones they will never see. Bureau Report, headlines today.
And while the Malaysian airliner tragedy has the potential of snowballing into a serious international confrontation if it is confirmed that the plane was indeed shot down by either the Ukrainian government or by Russia-backed separatists who are currently fighting in eastern Ukraine.
There have been claims and counterclaims from both sides, but no concrete evidence yet. A radar system reportedly spotted a heat signal around the time the plane was hit. Investigations are on to determine where exactly this missile came from.
The tragic downing of MH17 is a mystery which has no simple answers.
What this means, what the events in eastern Ukraine today actually mean for the future, but what happened, because people want answers here.
Till now, reports say the Boeing 777 plane crashed near Ukraine's border with Russia. A total of 295 people were on board MH17 flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. All of them dead. The plane wreckage found near Torres in Ukraine's Donetsk region. This region is the epicenter of a massive conflict between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian rebels. Ukrainians believe the plane was shot down, some even calling this a terror attack. A blame game between Russia and Ukraine has begun.
It is to be investigated in accordance to the Annex 13 of ICAO. These are rules of investigations of the International Civil Aviation Organization.
Details of what led to the catastrophe are sketchy. Little is known about whether the plane was shot at, if so, by whom. With strong denials by Russia and Ukraine, there is a possibility that there could be a third force behind the downing of the plane. Early speculations about the crash of Malaysian Airlines flight has centered on the possibility it could have been shot down as it passed over the volatile eastern Ukraine region. After all, Ukrainian officials say pro-Russia separatists or possibly Russia were behind the shooting down of 2 Ukrainian aircrafts in recent days. Even if it was the rebels, do they have the technology to shoot down a plane flying at such high altitudes? For now, Ukraine's defense officials have confirmed that there were no Ukrainian Air Force planes flying in the air at the time of the explosion. Bureau Report, headlines today.
In fact, we put out this picture that's playing out right behind us on the screens. This is the picture now that's doing the rounds on social media and was apparently clicked by one of the passengers before boarding that ill-fated plane.
The picture was posted, in fact, on his Facebook account, and ironically, he joked about the plane disappearing when he posted the photograph. The caption read, "If it disappears, this is what it looks like."
Well, ominous words indeed. But UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has called for a full, transparent international investigation into the Malaysian Airlines disaster in eastern Ukraine.
The UN Security Council, in fact, plans to hold an emergency meeting on the situation in Ukraine later today.
I regret that despite my repeated urgings and those of many regional and world leaders together, an already dangerous conflict has now escalated even further. In the past 24 hours, there have been a number of incidents involving the death of civilians. There can be no military solution to this conflict.
Well, developments threatening to unfold into a major international crisis. Let's in fact go across to Fred Wiener, a journalist in Moscow who's now joining us. Fred, is this crash being seen as an accident at all, or has that been ruled out completely?
Nobody is suggesting such a thing. It obviously was shot at by somebody with one of these very sophisticated radar-guided missile systems. And it could have been a mistake. In fact, it almost certainly was a mistake by somebody. They might have been shooting at something else, and then which the missile missed. And the missile does have its own onboard radar, which might have locked on to another target, and that would have been the airliner.
And Fred, there were reports of 2 combat jets being brought down by Russian separatists last week. Is this being seen as a revenge attack?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's correct to connect the other incidents that President Poroshenko referred to with this one. This is a very different thing. The other ones clearly were combat related. There was a transport aircraft, an AN-26 transport, which was shot down on Tuesday at the Ukrainians say an altitude of about 6,000 meters, which is considerably less. and the Ukrainians first claimed that it must have been a Russian missile that did it. And then in the last couple of days, 2 fighter jets, but these are Su-25 close support ground attack aircraft, have been shot down. And in one case, the Ukrainians do insist it was close to the Russian border and that Russian fighter planes shot it down. Now, whatever, those are all murky, contested things, but this is the shooting down of an airliner at that 5 miles height is a totally different situation.
Fred, we appreciate you joining us from Moscow this morning and getting us the very latest on investigations that are currently on. Clearly, a lot still in the realm of speculation.
Absolutely. In the wake of the reported downing of the Malaysian plane over Ukraine, major airlines have started avoiding the airspace. The Federal Aviation Administration, in fact, issuing a notice to pilots of US air carriers to avoid these routes.
Well, the list of companies includes the Russian Aeroflot, UT Air and Transaero, German Lufthansa and Turkish Airlines. Following FAA guidelines, all American airlines have also agreed to avoid the airspace over the Russia-Ukraine border. Indian carriers, Air India and Jet Airways will avoid the airspace of war-torn eastern Ukraine following a directive issued to them by the DGCA.
Air France and Virgin Atlantic have decided to temporarily reroute flights to bypass Ukraine. Dubai-based Emirates airline turned around its Kyiv-bound flight EK171, which returned to its base airport.